to find out more about the company in either French or Bambara afterwards, go and see Cedar at our booth, please. A little bit about Marley Lithium. We're listed on the ASX under the code MLL. We have about 264 million shares on issue, and like many of our lithium peers, our share price has suffered terribly in the last 12 months with a general slump in the lithium market. Our share price is currently 14 cents, which puts our market cap around 40 million Australian dollars. Got about $4 million in the bank, and we've actually got two lots of projects. We've got our main focus, which is our Goulamina lithium project in Mali, southern Mali, and we also have a series of gold tenements in the region of Goulamina, also in southern Mali. We're originally, like many other lithium companies, a gold exploration company, and we currently derive a royalty off some of those gold tenements. And we've packaged those up and looking for partners to do something with them. So very quickly on our board of management, we had a significant board refresh in November last year, and the board was largely replaced by those you see on the board in front of you now. These are all professionals with either direct lithium experience in the recent past, or mine development or financing experience. That board refresh really put the focus on the stage we're at now, where we're looking to design, finance, build and then operate our Goulamina lithium mine. So Goulamina itself, we released a pre-feasibility study in July last year, which showed absolutely fantastic economic results, some of which you can see on the board in front of you. The NPV was 920 million Australian dollars, and that was on a relatively conservative long-term forecast price for our 6% concentrate of $680 US a tonne. 18 months ago it was $1,000, it's now down around that $680 point. Our ore reserve and resource sits just outside the top 5 in the world in terms of hard rock lithium deposits. We've got 31.2 million tonnes of reserve at 1.56%, and we've got 103 million tonnes of resource at 1.34%. We'll be processing 2 million tonnes per annum of ore and producing 360,000 tonnes per annum of 6% concentrate. And that currently equates to about 1/7 of the world demand today, and it translates to 53,000 tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent. Our operating costs are good by any international standards that we look at, and if you benchmark them against recent lithium mines produced, for example, in Western Australia, then the operating costs are predicted to be almost identical to those. So when I'm asked about the highlights of the Goulamina lithium project, these are the points that come up to me. We've got a new board of management that I already talked about, and we've launched on an optimisation of the project. And by optimisation, these are the areas that any investor or offtake partner is going to look at as the first part of their due diligence. I'll cover those in a moment. We've got a 16-year mine life, and that's hugely expandable. Again, I'll go into the resource in a second. Most importantly, we've got our environmental approval granted by the Malian government, and we've submitted our exploitation permit or mining permit. Now, the guideline approval time for that is 3 months. It's been in a couple of months now, so in the very near future we expect it to be fully permitted and be able to start construction wherever we like. We're in fairly advanced discussions with 2 Chinese groups, one for EPC construction and one for offtake, and there's various other groups who we're in advanced discussions with. You'll see in a moment with our timeline that we're very much in a stage of trying to find partners, both on the offtake and finance side. And also, really the reason a lot of us are here, and my colleague in the previous presentation talked about, we find Mali an absolute pleasure to operate in. It's very stable in terms of mining. There's 12 gold mines currently in the country. Gold makes up 60% roughly of the exports and will contribute an additional 13% to the GDP once we come into full production. This slide intends to show roughly where we sit. As I say, the little whitish circle in the middle is Mali lithium. We sit just outside the top 5 in the world. Now the colours represent the orange and yellow represent those hard rock lithium mines that already have their product accounted for, either through offtake agreements they have with third parties or downstreaming, in-house downstreaming abilities they have. The one on the far right is AVZ in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is not as advanced as our project and has its own challenges. But when you then look down the list, really Mali Lithium is the largest uncommitted short-term project of this size for lithium in the world. So anyone wanting lithium in the next 3 to 5 years has to look at Mali Lithium for their source. I talked about Mali being a stable mining jurisdiction a moment ago. We'll add significantly to the Mali economy once we come into production, and the government, by granting the environmental permit, and we're working closely with them on the exploitation permit, have expressed their desire for Mali to branch out of gold and get into lithium. We intend to be the first hard rock lithium project of this size in West Africa. The environmental permit, much again like my predecessor commented, the guideline approval time was 8 weeks and it took about 3 months as a month extra. We anticipate the same with the exploitation permit. Now, our resource and reserve, I mentioned a moment ago that it's highly expandable. The top white parallelogram you can see represents the area over which our reserve has been established, our 31 million tonnes at 1.56%. The lower parallelogram is the remainder of our resource. Now the reserve converted at a 70% rate from resource to reserve. So if the remainder of the reserve converts at that rate, and we have every reason to believe it will, then we'll have about a 70 million tonne reserve, and that puts us well inside the top 5 in the world and gives us a 35-year mine life. In addition to that, further to the south, you can see outcrop areas and known mineralisations which we haven't even drilled yet. We believe the resource is therefore highly expandable. In addition, this whole area represents about 2% of the entire Sorokoro permit over which we own in Mali. So we're currently completing the definitive feasibility study for our project, and that's due to be complete in early 2020. Now the first stage optimisation of that are those points you can see on your right. First of all, it's power. We need to optimise our power. We're talking about diesel generation, for example, in the pre-feasibility study. We now think HFO is a viable option. Water is another very important one. We are planning now on water dams in the local area, which not only benefit us but benefit local communities. The resource and reserve, we don't have any of the resource in the measured category. There's a great deal in the indicated, so we'd like to do desktop and some drilling studies to bring that into the measured category. Our total capex is $200 million US, as you can see on the left-hand side, and that incorporates a 23% contingency, which is about right for the pre-feasibility study. As I say, we're working on the DFS at the moment and we're reducing the risk in the project, and hence the total amount of contingency will reduce as we release those results. Having previously built a lithium mine in the last couple of years in Western Australia, these numbers feel about right to me. Some will go up and down in the DFS. That's roughly what it's going to take to build a lithium project in Mali. So mining is very simple. We've got a 3.5 to 1 strip ratio. It's open pit, very simple operation. We'll deliver ROM ore to the ROM pad where it'll be stockpiled and fed into the processing plant. You can see the processing on the left there, and it's much the same as numerous lithium projects have been brought into operation in the last few years. The material gets crushed, put into dense media separation, which is a gravity process from which we get a coarse product. You can see that on the bottom left, about 6 millimetres, that's 6% lithium oxide. What doesn't get made into product out of the DMS gets put into a ball mill, going down to about 100 microns, and then into a flotation circuit. And then we get the fine product you see on the bottom left as well. Those two get blended together for handleability and truck to port. Our total operating cost, all-in cost, is $320 a tonne. As I say, that is comparable with recent West Australia operations. Now our transport is further. We've got around 1,000 kilometres to the port of Abidjan. That's nothing unusual in Mali. There's at least 500,000 tonnes of cotton per annum that goes down the same road that we'll be using. And there's other mines, zinc mine, for example, in Burkina Faso, which uses 80% of our road to transport similar volumes. So our transport cost is higher than those mines in Western Australia, but our labour costs are much lower, given that we anticipate using, like our colleagues elsewhere, majority of local labour, given their skills within Mali. So this shows our route. We're located about 200 kilometres south of Bamako, and we're about 1,000 kilometres from the port of Abidjan. Additionally, there's a port of San Pedro about 200 kilometres to the west of Abidjan, and it's about 800 kilometres to that port. It's smaller and less congested, and we think there's opportunities there. It's one of the areas we're working on in the DFS. I'll make a quick comment on our view of the lithium market. As I said before, we see a slump at the moment and prices are down. But given the demands in the market and the promises that auto manufacturers have made, we see a definite uplift in the next 2 to 3 years, right when we intend to come into production. This is an interesting graph. It's released by Albemarle quite recently, the largest producer of lithium goods in the world. And it has showed how Albemarle itself has underestimated the total demand year on year. So the bottom line was their 2015 estimate for lithium carbonate equivalent by 2025. That was around 600,000 tonnes. They then revised that up to the 800 in 2017 and so on and so on. Now they're guessing anywhere up to 1.4 million tonnes, depending on whether you're looking at the bull or the bear case. I always quote Peugeot, the auto manufacturer, who are by no means the largest in the world. They recently announced their first electric vehicle to be released this year. And they also announced that by 2023 they want every single vehicle in their fleet to be electric. Now they currently make 2 million, roughly, cars per annum. With about 30 to 40 kilos of lithium carbonate in every battery, that equates to about 70,000 tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent. That's 1/5 of the world demand today. Now they don't know where that lithium's coming from, and that's just Peugeot, one sizable but by no means largest auto manufacturer. I won't go into detail here. These just show that electric vehicle sales in China are up this year already, month on month, compared to last year, despite subsidies by the Chinese government being reduced. So, project timeline. We have our environmental permit. We've submitted our exploitation permit, which we expect to get in the very near future, after which we'll be fully permitted. We're working on our definitive feasibility study, which will be complete by the beginning of next year, following which we intend to start construction by the middle of next year. Between now and then, we're working with several interested parties to find financing and offtake partners. With an 18-month construction time, that should bring us into production by the end of 2021. This is the future we see for Mali Lithium. We've now got a clear path with the DFS almost complete and us almost being fully permitted to a final investment decision. We've got a very experienced team, both on the board and the technical management side, who've built lithium mines before and have the expertise to execute this in West Africa. And we want to be the first significant lithium project in West Africa and make a real difference to the Malian government. Thank you very much.